Hi, welcome to the latest episode of the Wellbeing Show. I'd forgotten what I was doing there. That's it's creeping up on me, that stuff. I need to go and get my brain tested. There won't be much to test though. There ain't much inside. So, welcome to the Wellbeing Show. Got Oliver Rolfe, great guest, who we started recording earlier in the week, but then, as is the case in London, as most of you know, as soon as it rains, the internet stops for some reason, which is quite weird given how much rain we get. But there you go. But very kindly, Oliver has come back. Do send me messages and thoughts. If you are watching me on YouTube, press subscribe. If it's on Instagram or somewhere else, do like. I'd love to hear your comments, whatever they are, really. But let's avoid hate when we put comments in. We don't want that. But some robust feedback is always welcome, and let me know what you think is working and what you'd like to see more of. With that done, I think my media team will be okay with that now. Won't get told off this time. So let's jump on. Hello, Oliver. Welcome back.
Hello, Mel. Nice to see you again.
Yeah,
Looking
thanks
very
again. I
bright
really
on this
appreciate your
this
flex.
morning.
Yeah,
My
appreciate
pleasure.
your flexibility. Um, So I'm gonna, as I said to you before the show, we're just gonna start again, even though you've been here before. So tell me about you're in London at the moment, is that right?
I'm in London, currently in Bushey, Hertfordshire,
Yeah.
just down the road from Stanmore, if anyone knows that, on the Jubilee line. It's
Yeah.
always my point of reference. Yeah, so just enjoying what is, for the first time in a while, a dry moment. Bit of sunshine, and it's lovely to get the vitamin D.
Yeah. There was a lot of sunshine earlier. You had to close all your curtains for this. So you're literally,
I did.
although sitting in dark, avoiding the sun just to do this show, that's a sign of our times, right?
Indeed, it is. Indeed, it is.
I
I'll
appreciate
have
it.
some afterwards.
Well, at least I know you're not a vampire. You didn't burn when the sun was on you. So I've discovered that much about you. Is that where you grew up, where you are now? Is that your background?
Give or take, yes. I always find it quite interesting that most people often stay within a radius of where they're brought up, just for
Yeah.
comfort and family and community and all these kind of things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been in the area-ish pretty much my whole life within I think probably a 3 to 5 mile radius maybe.
Yeah.
But nice area, happy memories, and please God, we'll progress and stay here and maybe even find a new house soon. So I leave it to the universe to
Yeah.
direct me as much as possible.
And you grew up with siblings, only child? What sort of, tell us a bit about your background and what that was like.
So older brother, older sister, and a younger half brother. Also a stepsister and a step brother, both older.
Yeah.
Parents divorced quite a young age, probably about 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Which obviously usual kind of dynamics when a divorcing family happens, a lot of changes, a lot of experiences. And yeah, other than that, it was a pretty happy childhood. But yeah, always around the area, always had a good relation with my brother and sister, and actually, as I said, my half brother as well. But as we've got older, I think the connections become certainly a lot stronger.
It's interesting, isn't it? That
Mm.
the longevity of some relationships is a quality all of its own, I think. That there's a certain comfortableness and intimacy and a certain understanding of the story, not having to rehash all the story again, and predictability, all that sort of stuff are important psychological safety features, to be honest.
Mm. Mm. And
Um,
it's
it
also,
often explains it often explains why people stay better the devil you know. So even if it's not a great relationship, they'll stay with it just for those types of factors because change is
mm.
uncomfortable. And school was okay for you? You enjoyed school?
Yeah, so my upbringing was slightly different to most. I had a lot of experience, as I said. So from the age of, say, 6 to 16, I had about 45 operations,
Right.
most on my sinuses. So schooling was great, but I had factors that made it slightly more tricky than it would have done otherwise. But apart from those incidences, yeah, I really enjoyed. I enjoyed the camaraderie of school. I enjoyed the experiences of school. I love sport. Especially my secondary school in particular. I did everything. I
Right.
was captain in most sports. I played chess. I was swimming. I was in the theatre. Um, just trying to take absolutely everything in. And yeah, I really enjoyed that. I didn't love the educational side of it. I found it a bit boring, but
Right.
it didn't do me any harm, put it that way.
Okay. Okay. And the hospitalizations, did they involve going into hospital? Did it involve things like, general anesthetic and all that sort of stuff?
Yes, most of them were general anesthetic.
Okay.
So basically, what the long story short, I suffered from polyps and needed polypectomies, and it was mainly in the sinuses. So
Okay.
usually with a polyp, it grows, you get rid of it, and if it comes back, it doesn't come back for a long time. But for whatever reason, my body was generating them far quicker than any normal person.
Sure.
And it's quite a rare situation. I think there's only a handful of cases that are like this in the world, in
Uh-huh.
fact. So I am a phenomenon, which is always nice. Um,
I guess why I'm
and
asking is because I mean, we know there's these things called ACEs that happen, adverse
mhm,
childhood experiences,
yeah.
and hospitalization can fit into that category and can have consequences, no matter how wonderful the hospital staff might be, and they would be, but going under is frightening. And if you're having multiple ones when you're developmentally immature, I'm sure that has some sort of psychological impact.
Yeah, absolutely. I still remember certain moments which are and I say terrifying. I don't think it's the right word, but wholly
I think it
uncomfortable.
probably is the right word.
Well, maybe, but
I think
exceptionally
if you're a
distressing.
child, it's going to be, isn't it? I mean, that's all right. I mean, the way I think about it is like this: that when a child experiences something, they've got a small mind and a small set of experiences that can't encompass it because they are small, both in terms of life experience and physically and all that sort of stuff. So even if, as an adult, we look back on something and go, "It wasn't that serious," when we're this big,
Mm,
it was because it was that big to
yeah.
us. When we're this big we're sort of the same size as the experience, so it doesn't really matter.
Yes.
But actually, when we're little, the experience is overwhelming. So you had a lot of those, and
Well,
I
yeah,
imagine, yeah, they had some impact.
I would say, regardless of the size of the human, they were traumatic experiences. I remember one instance. So I sometimes had packing in my sinuses after the operation, which is like the worst thing. It's probably the worst part of the operation in many respects
Right.
because you had to get it out. And that was, if you think about from a young child, you've got loads of stuff like in your sinuses. You've obviously got lots of blood, blah, blah, blah. And it was the worst experience ever. And they used to kind of put this thing where they'd almost be able to pull it out. But I remember one instance, I hated it so much, I fought against it. And as
Right.
the thing came out, it literally sprayed the room with blood.
Yeah.
Um, you
Well,
know,
those are
that, that
terrifying experiences.
that's an
That
experience.
that counts as terrifying, mate. Just listening to you, I'm going, oh, I don't want to hear that.
Yeah, it was that was bad. The other one, I almost died, which was quite a severe scenario.
Okay.
So I
So here we
'cause
go. That's okay. So
so
I
I've
thought maybe, possibly he's sort of minimizing the impact a little bit.
yeah, look, you deal with it. There are experiences, and you deal with things, and you learn, you progress. But so this instance, so if you've ever had a general anesthetic, or you've never had it, so you either have gas, an injection.
Yeah.
Those are the two main things that most people use to put you to sleep. Now, as a child, they didn't really like using injections, and I didn't like the cream, the numbing cream. For whatever reason, that was worse for me, the numbing cream, than
Okay.
a lot of other things.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we did the gas and air. Literally, gas is the worst thing possible. I hated it. I hated the smell. I hated the taste.
Right.
I just absolutely hated it. So I think I must have had it in a previous operation, and some of my operations were back to back, almost 3 months apart.
Yeah.
Which wasn't normal, but it happened. And I think on this instance, they actually, if I'm right in saying I think they either put the gas kind of facing my face, um, and oh no, actually maybe they put it over my face actually, the mask, so I couldn't get away from it. The
Yeah.
first time it was kind of directed towards me.
Like
Um,
suffocation. Yeah.
yeah. So because I hated it that much, I decided to take a huge gulp of air, held my breath, and hoped that would be all
Um,
right.
yeah.
What happened was my mum was in the room where they put you to sleep, and then usually when I was asleep, she'd leave and whatever else. Um, so I obviously went to sleep, and my mum was there, and she kind of said to the doctor or the anaesthetist, "Why is he going blue?" So obviously I held my breath, I'd knocked
Is that
myself out
normal?
unconscious.
Is that normal? Blimey.
Yeah. So they kicked her out the room pretty quickly.
Right.
Um, did whatever they did. And I'm here to tell another tale. But no, honestly, this is one thing out of a lifetime of experiences for me. And
Sure.
I look back and I do feel I feel privileged to be alive in some ways.
Yeah.
Well, I think we all should feel privileged to be alive in many ways.
Yeah.
But when I was, how old was I? 3, 4, 5, something like this. So my family was still together. We're in Regent's Park,
Yeah.
a lovely part of London, beautiful day. We were with another family at the time, and in Regent's Park they've got rowboats. Now, some have got pedalos, some have got rowboats. So anyway, some bright spark in my family or the other family decided, let's go on a rowboat. It will be fun. Um, I think my dad got in the rowboat first. My sister was in the rowboat. I was in the rowboat, and my mum was just about to get in. And the guy who was on the side, for whatever reason, let the boat go. So my mum's basically leg was splitting further and further apart. Ended up flipping over the rowboat. My dad got away from it. My sister got away from it. I got stuck underneath it. So the only thing I really remember, as you would probably quite understand, is it was complete darkness.
Yeah.
I didn't really remember much else, and I still don't really remember much else from that moment.
Yeah.
But my sister, who must have been 7 or 8, maybe,
Sure.
went in underneath, got me, grabbed me out, and my dad pulled me out. Now, I still remember that. I don't really like boats very much, but it's not because of that. Actually, I don't. I get seasick, so it's not great. Um, but I look at these kind of experiences, and one, I've obviously quite realised the fragility of life. And two, I've also realised that these experiences are, so you could say why we're here if you look at a reason of why we're here in the greater scheme of life. Um, but certainly once you experience something, you either, for me, you do one or two things. You move on, you didn't learn from it. You learn, you dare I say it, look back and you can enjoy the experience. I don't know if that sounds strange, but
Mhm.
when you look back you can, or I can anyway. Um, or it's something to then maybe digest, to learn, and actually tell others about. Because I
Yeah.
don't think these experiences are a negative situation. I think speaking about anything is wildly important. I was talking about this yesterday, in fact, about how I don't believe people talk enough, and I certainly don't believe people listen enough. And I'm not talking about this superficial conversation of, "Hi, how are you? How's your day? Isn't the weather great?" That for me, I get very frustrated with these conversations because they're kind of meaningless. I like conversations that have, I won't say have purpose. I think purpose is probably the wrong word, but certainly have a more connective element to it. And it can be about that people, a lot of people don't like being vulnerable, so they don't go into their deep dark souls of what happens in reality. But my version of that is, if we don't do that, then no one will ever know you, like ever. Your
Mhm.
parents, your partners, your brothers, your sister, no one's going to know you. And this is kind of, in many respects, a journey I've always been on about looking at my life. A lot of people go, why are you happy to tell people, your life story? And, you went through so many things and, blah, blah, blah. And they go, well, my first thing is, why not? I don't see a negative towards it. If someone looks at me differently because of that, then that's their problem. That's not mine.
Mm.
That's not my, I'm still the same person. I've still gone through these scenarios. I haven't made it up. which you could look at it and go, wow, it sounds like it's a lot. My dad actually called me a cat not long ago, saying it's amazing when you read your book, it's how many times you've kind of dodged a scenario.
Sure.
Uh, but I have this real passion to try and envelop or at least direct people for
Sure.
meaningful conversations.
I'm going to
And,
go
and,
back
and
a bit because you're giving us, Oliver, as a product at the end of a lot of learning. And I know you've done a lot of learning in between. And how has Oliver got to this point is the question, rather than the conclusions that you're coming up with. So let's go into that conversation. So going back, you're a child, you have these experiences, you have these near-death experiences, and they are definitely potential for developing trauma responses.
Mhm.
Um, so particularly going to hospital, lots, the separation from family, the being put under, which is slightly akin to nearly dying anyway. Well, we know that psychologically. And then you have that near the death experience, and you're frightened and you're holding your breath, you go under the water, all that sort of stuff. So, um, you obviously, as a child, I don't think necessarily thought in this way, but as an adult, you're thinking in this way. How do I make a lotus flower out of the manure of my life is the metaphor, right? So how do I flip those experiences? And let's find out how you've done that rather than that you have done it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay, so clearly there were protective factors going on in your life, as they might say in social services. So risk factors, the hospital, the falling in the lake. I happen to have nearly drowned as well as a child on a boated lake, so a similar type of experience. And There were protective factors, which is stable home, even though there was a divorce, obviously loving parents, and you've learned from that stable home that your step family are additions rather than problems. So clear
Mhm.
messaging in your family about something positive there, pro-social, additional. The school gave you enough a range of choices so that even if you weren't that academic, you could excel in other ways and feel successful and part of. So lots of protective factors going on. Tell me about the culture of your family, because I think that might also be quite important for people to understand. I mean, what were your parents' attitudes towards knocks in life and life itself? What were their type of experiences that they brought to the table?
Well, I'll go back to one point you mentioned about a stable family upbringing. I was fortunate to have a stable family to a degree. So
Yeah.
I didn't spend a lot of time with my father growing up at all.
Okay.
Um, Invariably, I don't really remember much time that we spent
If I
together, and
replace the
off
word stable with loving,
uh, from one side of my family,
right?
that's definitely what it felt like from more than another. But I was very, very fortunate. I had a mother who gave everything of herself, a grandfather who was, and a grandmother as well, who were
Yeah.
absolutely phenomenal people and really were a second parent. So
Yeah.
we were very
And what were
fortunate.
their sort of philosophies of life, Oliver? Would you try and encapsulate them?
Um, just firstly, both I'd say my mum, or I call my gramps, my nan, they're just the best people,
Okay.
best human beings, giving, loving, caring, um, smart, hardworking,
Right.
giving of themselves,
So
just
social,
really, yeah.
pro-social, involved in their local community, helping other people, volunteering, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, my grandfather in particular, he did a lot of charity.
Yeah.
He was chairman of I think a couple of charities. He gave an ambulance to a hospital.
Right.
My mum, she used to look after disability children when we were growing up, and we had children used to come to our house as well. She also used to work for a charity
Right.
for also special learning needs and things like that as well. So it's always been around, and even the way she is every day, she gives of herself constantly. So we've certainly had that.
So that was all modeled to you, give back to the world, that there are people that need help and then it's good to help other people, that sort of stuff. That was part of the family culture.
Yeah, I think it's probably more by osmosis than people
Yeah, yeah,
going out,
yeah,
or us having that conversation and said you've got to go and help people. I just think it's who we are and who we've been
yeah.
as people.
No,
And
I
I can
totally
see that with
agree. The sort
my
of
siblings as
example I
well.
tend to give is if you want to teach a child not to smoke, you've got two parents. One has a cigarette in their hand saying, don't smoke. The other has never smoked or has quit smoking and says, don't smoke. Which one does the child copy, right? Because that's what kids do is they copy the important adults in their life. So that role modeling, that osmosis is absolutely spot on. That's the way it happens. Lecturing children never works.
No,
It's never
no,
worked for
no,
me. I never listened to
no,
a lecture in my life.
no. I've got two young children, and one definitely listens more than the other. One
Right.
believes that she's right quite a lot at the moment. So um, I just say to her, I said, look, you're going to have to live through your own experiences, and whatever happens, we'll be here to help you if you're not willing to listen. And to be fair, you can't teach someone by listening and by writing down and by reading. I think when you experience whatever it is in life, you suddenly go, oh, right, now I know what they meant.
Yeah.
Um, and hopefully you just, you can be there to support if and hopefully not when, but if it happens.
Yeah. Well, something is going to happen in life. That's the way life is. But we can't avoid risk. We have to teach our kids how to manage it and deal with it, where to go for help. I mean, it's help-seeking behavior, which is the most important thing. We know that. If you're in a problem, know who to ask for help. That's the basic life rule. But there was that culture of being part of the wider world,
Mhm.
putting back into the world. Um, where do you think you got this idea of transformation of negative to positive? Where did that come from? Was that a family culture thing or later life experience?
It's a good question. Um, I would always say I've probably been a
Sorry.
positive person from day one of my life. I don't believe that I'm a negative. I don't look at things negatively. But I would say there's been more of a conscious shift over the last probably 10 to 12 years. Actually, so another example of life experiences about 12 years ago, I slipped a disc in my back, T5, I think it was, so the thoracic.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, it recovered as much as it can recover because it never can. And subsequently, 18 months later, I slipped another disc in my neck. Then had some tests just to work out what was going on. And then I was diagnosed with something called it's actually ankylosing spondylitis or ankylosing spondylarthritis. And what that basically is an inflammatory disease of the spine and the joints, and left
Yeah.
untreated, the spine would fuse. So I now have something like 7 damaged discs in my spine, or neck and spine, shall I say? And that was a big change in my life. So I was a huge sports person. I played football the whole time. Football was my happy space and my happy place, but it was what's the right word? It was my zen. It was my moment when my mind was completely clear. I could just be in whatever stage of life, whatever was happening, and just literally envelop myself in that moment. So after my first damaged disc, I had some time out playing football.
Yeah.
After my second one and the diagnosis, I basically had to stop playing. And whilst I was a decent player, I'm talking about professional level, but a decent player, and I could enjoy what I was doing.
Yeah.
It was a huge shift for me, a huge shift. I had to find something that filled the void,
Yeah.
um, and also try and help me mentally, because as I said, football was really a very, very good mental
Yeah. I
support
mean,
for me.
exercise and its role in mental health is well known. So, yeah.
Yeah. And invariably, I went down two directions. One was work. I threw myself into work. To be fair, it worked out well. I had a new company I was building. And yeah, so I threw myself into that
Yeah.
100%. And then I also went down a more, I'd say, more spiritual route, dealing with more meditations, meditation circles,
Okay.
and trying to understand more about me. And
That's an
and
interesting choice, particularly as a successful businessman and a bloke. it's not that normal. I mean, I'm not saying it's abnormal or wrong or anything like that, but it isn't usual. So, what do you think took you down that more spiritual meditation route? What was it in you, or what did you experience? I thought, right, I'm going to give that a go. I mean, I think it's a wise choice personally, but what was it that got you going in that direction?
Well, I think first and foremost, I've always been a spiritual person. I've always felt different connections, been quite intuitive or been intuitive full stop.
Yeah.
Having a feeling and different senses around me. So
As well as the
and
sport at school, you also did the theatre and the arts as well.
I did as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
I I,
So the
I think
interesting combination.
I've always said one thing in my life, and it's kind of amazing how what you project and what you think about what you put out there does come back and you look back. I've always said I want everything in this life. I want to be successful business wise. I want to be financially successful. I want to be educationally successful. I want to help people. I want to have a family. I want to be good at sports. I want to be good at theatre. I want to be on stage again. Um, all of these. I just want the full richness of life and authentically, not to do it for the sake of doing it, and but authentically doing it. And my I think my mother's very spiritual, and while she hasn't personally gone down that route on a constant basis, it's definitely there. My dad's always been very close to mediums and psychics throughout his life, so I guess I've always heard that. It's always been around me. But I went to a lady when I was about 18 years old, and we still speak to this day, and not in the same vein. And she and I connected wonderfully well, and she has been near enough 100% on everything she's ever said to me, and literally everything. And the other side of it, going back slightly, is the meditation circle, and the connectivity within that. You start to, the saying, seeing is believing. When you see, when you feel, and when you believe, suddenly things become a lot easier as well. And I think once you've seen, it's hard to once you see something, you can't unsee it. It's there. It's a life experience, whatever it is. So going into meditation for me, I think was something that felt very natural. As I said, there was a need. I obviously couldn't do anything that was too strenuous. I didn't really know how my body was. I changed everything. I really changed everything in that moment. That my body changed for me, and I changed with it. He was talking about the nutritional side as well. All of these elements, so nutrition, meditation, going closer to nature, long walks, which led me on to doing the marathon. All of these things are so interconnected in my life that it started from that moment of, whilst yes, it's always been there, but the moment that it progressed was the moment that I stopped playing football, and it just felt like exactly the right thing to do. And one thing I would say as well now is um, there is a proverb, I'm sure, is something like um, a teacher will appear when it's the right time for them to appear.
Okay, yeah. Well, when you're ready.
Some
Yeah, there's
Yes, something
psychological
like this.
truth in that. I want to go back a bit and make a couple of statements, if that's all right. So,
Sure.
like from my perspective, as somebody who does evidence-based practice, I'm certainly not going to promote mediums and stuff like that. It's a personal choice, but there's no
Mhm.
evidence for it. But this, what I would say is this: there's lots of evidence for if you look at the word spirituality as developing a bigger sense of meaning and purpose in life, particularly in its role in managing trauma, for
Yep.
example. And the second thing is that there's a lot of evidence for meditation, without a doubt. I mean, meditation as a practice, I don't know whether you did mindfulness or some other
Mhm.
form, but mindfulness is the one where there's an Everest-sized mountain of evidence for it.
Mhm.
And again, in the management of trauma, but also in the management of things like depression and anxiety, which would have been typical things that would happen to a high performing athlete who suddenly can't perform. So I've
Mhm.
got a number of mates who are international athletes, and often what we don't know about the life cycle of that international athlete is when they can no longer perform at that level, they often have some quite significant periods of depression and anxiety post that. Because partly because of the exercise itself, but also partly because of the status and meaning and purpose. Now, to some extent, you manage that by getting involved in work, which does give us status, meaning, and purpose. But I'm really intrigued that you also chose this spiritual, meditative, self-healing, healing path as well, which I think is a really wise choice because the work alone might have just led to some form of obsessive type, addictive type stuff where you were locked in on your external validation of self through success in work and all that sort of stuff, which never really deals with sort of a sense of depression or feeling hollowed out. But
Mm.
would you say your family, I mean, you say your father to some extent was involved in this stuff but your family itself, the culture of your family, was it always, um, were you given the impression that there was always a purpose and meaning to life events?
Good
Where do you
question.
think you learned that from, do you think? Was it just because you had to at this point where you couldn't use your back?
No, I would say that it's just always been part of me.
Has it? Okay.
Yes, I think look, our family is very open. When you have a disjointed family through separation,
Okay.
there was definitely you're having conversations at a younger age, or I certainly had conversations at a younger age that I just wouldn't have had. Whether it be with my mum or my brother and sisters or
Right.
whatever
Right.
else.
Yeah.
So I
Okay.
think that there's a certain awareness you've got that life's different anyway. And you do look, unfortunately, as a divorced child, you will miss out unless you've got parents who are still there, really still there. You do miss out,
Right.
and I can see it even to this point in my lifetime that for example, I'm taking my son away this year.
Right.
We're going to Disney in Miami. A fantastic trip. Can't wait. I didn't do it when I was younger. And I've got that in my mind. Things like that. I go, do you know what? I would love to have that experience with my dad. I'd
Yeah.
love to have had that memory as a child. But then you take different elements, and whether it is that openness, the conversations, there was a lot of there was a lot of difficult moments for my parents in their separations and their lives. So
Oh,
I just think I had a much wider sense of what was going on and what was around me. But invariably, I always felt it myself. I always have done, and it's still to this day is something which I'm very aware of.
okay. Um, so I know you've written a number of books and jump us forward. I mean, when we met early in the week, which we can't use, I know something about your professional history. You're very successful. It is significant that um, because successful men don't often turn towards these other more esoteric aspects of life. But except when I meet a lot of successful men, they are, and it's not projected enough because actually a lot of very successful high performing men are also doing meditation, are also thinking about their health and well-being, are also volunteering and putting back into society, are also being parents, etc. But unfortunately, the idea of successful maleness has been overtaken by projected images of toxic maleness. And so that's partly why I'm really excited to have you here, because you're clearly not a toxic male. You're quite the opposite of that. So I'm getting some sense of how this capacity to transform, and I'm really fascinated by people who transform life experience. You've written three books, I know, and we're going to talk a little bit about the addiction blueprint, but just quickly run us through books one and two and what they're about.
So we haven't touched on what I am and what I do. So I'm a headhunter.
Yeah,
I work globally. I work in the financial industry, and it goes
all
back
very
to
competitive, all very challenging environments.
certainly competitive, certainly challenging. However, the way I've always done my job is to give back to people, is
Yeah,
to really understand the nuances of people, I would say. I've spent thousands of hours listening to conversations, having conversations, being one to one with people,
yeah,
hearing tones of voice, etc., etc. So my job is always been surrounded about understanding the human, whoever the human is, whether they know themselves or not. So my first book is called The Survivor's Guide to Your Career Today, and really it's focused for me. I would say anyone from the age of 14 to 25 in particular, early stages of career, and it goes through everything. It goes through how to do a CV, cover letters. It's got I think 170 interview questions. It looks at body language. There's
Yeah,
elements of positivity.
yeah.
It's really it's if I was going to sit down with a 25-year-old and they wanted to have all the advice that I would give someone, that's in the book. I
Okay.
just got to a point where I realized I don't have enough time to
But
do
there's
that.
more than that in the book. I'm not letting you get away with that because there's a style and an approach which is in the book because it's in you, and which I would characterize as, from my perspective, as attachment based or relationship based or human based, right? You're not just
Yes.
creating things that go out and make loads of money for you and them, right? That's not what you're about, as far as I can tell, unless you are.
Do you know what? I've always it's always a strange balance when it comes to money. Because people go, oh, is it doing really well? Have you sold loads of copies? You making loads of money. And really, I think you can't write a book with that mentality.
I wasn't talking about the
Um,
book. I was talking about the people
oh
that you
me,
helped in their careers over the.
oh yes, of course. Yeah, people first, and it has to be money second. It has to.
But I bet your experience is this, that by putting people first, the money has come.
I always believe that by doing the right thing, the right things will happen.
Yeah.
Um, I do believe in karma. I do believe in energy. So
Okay. You know I
I
don't, but doesn't matter. I'm
that's
going to nail
fine.
it down
That's
a
fine.
bit more. Going to nail it down a bit more. Would you say you're successful because you treat people in a decent manner and they work hard for you because of that, or in spite of that?
I would say one thing before I answer that properly.
Go
The
on.
word successful for me,
I know. Go
um,
on, go on,
I
go on. Frame it. We'll go.
I
Yeah. All right.
I would believe that
Great.
the perception of me will could can look successful, and whether it's me or other
All
people,
right.
it's the perception I think that it can look like success.
I got that.
What
I
it what
understand that. I understand that. We
and
both
I,
agree
and
on
I,
that one. But hey, let me give you a scenario. You've got a choice to be able to pay your bills or not pay your bills, right? Which, I mean, I grew up in poverty. I'm going to tell you, it ain't fun. There's nothing noble about it. And the link between poverty and illness and violence and danger and all that sort of stuff, that evidence link is absolutely 100% certain. So we do need a certain level of financial security, and you've clearly got it, right? Now, there is a projected image that that's not possible unless you're a sort of dog who eats another dog. Now, I don't think that's true. And talking to you, I don't believe that's true. So that's the question I'm asking you. Not some esoteric question about the meaning of success, right? Okay.
well, it's just I don't want to think that other people think that I think I'm successful. I believe I still have a long way to
I
go
know you're
in what
humble. It's
I
fine.
want
I
to
know
achieve
you're
as
humble, but
success.
it's fine. Go on. Answer the question, though.
Um,
Go on.
okay. I've never trampled over someone to
Right.
get what I want.
Right. But yet you still have what you want. Isn't that interesting? And I bet if I asked the people that you found supported in their careers that they have positive feelings towards you and that they would want to come back and use your company and your service again and again and again because you make them feel like they're important as human beings, right?
I would hope so. I'm pretty close to the people that I work with, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I like the connection. I like the human connection. I
Great.
like to
And
be
that's
of
it, isn't
service.
it? I think that's the secret right there. Okay. And that it is possible to be both objectively in society's terms successful and successful in the way you're saying, which is in that sort of social capital, the emotional capital, the relational capital, and feeling good about oneself,
Mm.
the esteem to oneself. I have done the right thing in my life. I feel good about myself because when I look in the mirror in the morning, it's me looking at me. And that's really important stuff, isn't it?
I don't have a problem sleeping. Is
Right.
the easy way. You know,
Right.
I don't have to look over my shoulder. Never have done. Um, yeah, I've been very, very fortunate. I've worked very, very hard
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
do whatever I've done for a long, long time, and I continue to work hard.
And I guess
I
my point is this, that it is possible to be successful in all those ways, right? Now, given a choice, you know, um, I would, I guess, like you, but I would choose that I feel good about myself first, and then the other stuff flow from it, right? That would be the choice I would defer to, right?
Well, I think it's about being authentic to
Right.
yourself,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
whoever that version of you is, and I would say being comfortable with that first, and
Okay.
that's both ways because in a world that I'm I'm a contradiction to myself because I'm strong and I can be aggressive, especially when it comes to sport and leadership.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm soft, kind, and sensitive.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, well, how can you do both? So within a world of finance, there could be a lot of you could be pushed around quite a lot,
Yeah.
and trampled on. And unfortunately, within finance, it's probably going to happen at some point.
Yeah.
So it's also dealing with that side of it.
Yeah. One
But
needs that
yeah,
resilience to be able to stand up for oneself.
absolutely, absolutely. But that comes back to authenticity, honesty to yourself,
Yeah.
and respect of self
Yeah.
and self-protection.
Yeah.
And all of those things come with experience,
Yeah.
with understanding, as you said, with a bit more humility. Because I was probably a little bit more arrogant. I don't think I'm really an arrogant person, but I've always been very assured that I'm doing the right thing and I believe in the way that I'm doing it, which is why I set up my own company. I didn't like, unfortunately, recruitment or headhunting is a world where, yes, you get paid for placing someone and getting them a job, but the metrics of doing that could be you're shoving people in to get paid,
I know. Yeah.
or you're guiding, consulting, um, being of service. I think that phrase "being of service" is so important
Yeah.
in whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's within the community. This is why I've written the three books. This is why I. It's why I walked the marathon. This is why I'm a coach for my child's football team.
Yeah.
You know, I love when the kids look at me and they've got a smile on their face and they've had a great game and they've made a memory for life. And I remember being that age and
Yeah.
how much I love playing sport. That for me, I personally think is a massive privilege, a huge honor, and something I enjoy as much as anything else that I do.
Totally agreed. Totally agree with you. So we've done the first book, which is based upon career and is a good guide. And all your books I know are handy, practical guides. You don't need to read them from beginning to end. You can dip in
Yes.
and go, that's an interesting idea. Let me read about that. And I know they're very practical, like you. They're helpful. The second book is
The second book's called The Holistic Guide to Your Health and Wellbeing Today.
right.
Um,
That deals with that period of time when you're ill with your back, I guess, and you're recovering
Absolutely.
from that.
So it is a mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional um, healing of what I learned throughout that period,
Okay.
and put into practice myself. So nutrition in terms of the foods that obviously help your body, herbs, vegetables, everything, absolutely everything.
Brilliant.
And then the one thing I've taken in that book, and one thing I love about that book in particular, is that it's not me. Okay, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not. But I had one of the best international numerologists help write the book. I had a healer medium to help me with the chakra system more than anything else, because that's something which I believe in. Say the energy, I know you don't. Um, but there's that side of it, the emotional side, using Daniel Gollan's emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
looking at people like oh my god, I forgot his name, Malcolm Gladwell with Blink. Just
Yeah.
the fact that we make 10,000 small decisions in the blink of an eye. All of these different things I absolutely really connected with.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of it comes down to self-awareness, and what's good for you. And I think this is a problem which a lot of people have. They don't they don't either sit with themselves, or they're not aware of what they're doing.
Yeah.
And what we put in our body is so important. And that comes back to the meditation side of it, with the mental aspect, and it touches on, it really does start to touch on the addiction side, and stress and burnout and anxiety and all those kind of things,
Yeah.
which obviously my new book, The Addiction Blueprint, really speaks about quite highly.
So you had a period of burnout and use of
I,
something that you would call
I did.
addiction, I guess.
Not addiction. So this is the thing. So I think first and foremost, why have I written a book on addiction? I think that's a good question to ask if I'm not an addict. So I grew up in a house where addiction was around,
Yeah.
and throughout my life, I've been involved in some family treatments and whatever else. Then on top of that, um, when was it? The start of, let's talk about 2023, June 23,
Yeah.
July 23. I really started to feel exhausted. And I'm not talking about feeling tired. I'm just feeling like I had nothing left.
Yeah.
That my it felt like my soul had dropped out of my body. It's the only way I could kind of it just felt I felt empty. So that was a period I went, okay, well, I know something needs to change. I need a break. And this is a period where I've been working for, I had my company, had my company for 17 years. I hadn't had a break in at least 17 years. And I'm not talking about, I didn't go on holiday. I went on holiday, but I worked. So just no breaks at all. So that period happened. We actually ended up going on holiday for a good amount of time that summer. And my daughter was ill twice. It turned it out to be an absolute nightmare. So we came back at September, and I just continued on with life, and I worked harder and harder and harder and harder and harder until it got to March the following year. And I had in fact, I came back from a New York trip for work,
Hmm.
and my New York trips were just stupid. I used to be sort of 25 to 30 meetings in 5 days.
Hmm.
Um, you know, up at probably 4:35 because of jet lag, meetings from start to finish. I used to go out for maybe a drink meeting at 5, 6 o'clock. Then I'd be out for dinner with another client. I wouldn't finish until whenever, 10, 11, 12, 1. Then it's rinse, repeat every single day.
Yeah.
Um, and coming back, I was finished. I felt awful. I didn't feel well, which turns out I actually had something called prostatitis, which came out of nowhere, and really kind of impacted me physically and mentally. And I think that was the point. I didn't know what something was, and I went into a real tailspin of what have I got? And I was thinking like the worst things in the world. Just yeah, just the worst things. My mind went to, as someone's said to me, doom scrolling. I was asking Dr. Google what all of my symptoms are, and usually they didn't come up with anything positive. And it really affected me. Just if I may, just to step back slightly, because it's not about one thing with what happened. It's a period of my life in particular which caused and has caused our family a lot of stress. So COVID was to 2020, end of 2019. During sort of 2019 to 2025, what has happened is that my obviously one, we had COVID. My son was heavily impacted at the time. He was about 5 or 6. He was one of the children that went in a school,
Yeah.
out of
Yeah.
school, in school, out, and he was really unfortunately affected, and still to the day this day really is. So he had separation anxiety, which I think he's still got a bit now,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that's also led on to the fact that he's just not slept properly by himself since then. We're talking now 6 years down the line,
Mhm.
so still working through that. Both my son and daughter were diagnosed with ADHD.
Hmm.
which was difficult in many respects, and trying to work that out as parents as well. My wife lost her father in that period of time, which also created a different dynamic of her grieving, and she's not, more so now, but she's not an emotional person. She doesn't talk about these things too much,
Hmm.
so she kind of held on for too long. And then, I had an issue with my father during this period. Um, I had my own health stuff going on. I had work to deal with, and I shut everything out. I worked and I worked and I worked and I worked and I worked. And then going back to where I was in March, I just knew something had to change. I just knew something had to change. I just felt I had nothing really left to give. I felt that it got to the point where everything wasn't good. It just felt everything wasn't good, and I wasn't good. I wasn't good health. I wasn't good mentally. I wasn't good physically. I just needed a real break.
Yeah.
And ended up going on a walk with my brother one afternoon. It was just after Easter Sunday, I think. It must have been Easter Monday, and we went on a long walk. God knows how long it was, and then we talked, and we talked very openly about that, what I was feeling, thinking, what was going on. And by the time I'd come back, or we came back to my house, he said, "Look, you need to step away." And at that point, the only thing I was wanted to do was just say yes to basically any suggestion. It got to the point where I didn't know what really I needed.
Yeah.
Um, and to have someone go, do you know what? I've got a wellness centre you can go to. It's wellness and rehabilitation for addiction. Go there. As I said, I just said yes. Um, and I think that was on the Monday. I think by the Wednesday I was there,
Yeah.
and it was just, and I still, people kind of look at me strangely when I say this, but it was one of the best experiences of my life. Like absolutely one of the best experiences of my life in every metric, because you're talking about one genuine human connection
Hmm.
at a very, very deep level. You're talking about, so I was effectively in there for wellness, and then you had a lot of people in there for addiction.
Hmm.
Now, when you spend time with addicts, and this honestly, there's such lovely people. We all got on so well, and it was a great bunch, which I think
Yeah.
really helped the experience. But when you're going through that experience, and you're having a lot of vulnerable sessions together, and you're opening up, and everyone's more or less being their authentic selves. I think the more authentic you are in that situation, that's where the benefit comes from. It's when you're holding back that you don't get the truthfulness. And when you look at it and you talk about traumas, and we've talked about this previously, I look at all of the things that we've discussed today, and what's happened in my life, whether it's
Hmm.
not playing football, or
Oliver, I'm just going
operations
to
when I was young.
push us on because we are running out of time. So just
No
want to give
problem
you
at
a
all.
heads up. Yeah.
So no, I was just going to say, so the elements of it really are understanding about what goes on in one's life through trauma, and to get to a point of progression, which is what the addiction blueprint's about.
Okay.
It goes into every sense of how close we are to addiction, and
Yeah.
how people can fall into it as well.
Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing about it is that some people, I mean, there's a saying, isn't it, which I'm sure you know, which is the opposite of addiction is connection.
Mm.
And that it sounds like you had this transformative connecting experience with people who weren't necessarily diagnosed in the same way as you, but had a fundamental sense of disconnection, which is
Mm.
what you were feeling. And you needed a boost in terms of wellness. So take us through, and you're going to have to do this in bullet points, I'm afraid, Oliver, the opposite of who you are. But take us through the addiction blueprint, the book, what it covers, and just be aware that, we are going to run out of time. So you're going to have to scoot on through this one for me.
Okay, so it talks basically about everything that you can possibly think about. Why addiction happens, the characteristics of it. It talks about the fundamentals of the 12 steps of addiction,
Yeah.
but it also goes through the connections to addiction. So physical health, mental health, emotional, spiritual well-being. but it also goes into, lack of sleep, how that can affect, or having ADHD or depression or anxiety. But then at the same time, things like the environment, as you mentioned before, money, control, stress, trauma,
Yeah.
relationships,
Yeah.
so even social media, internet, stuff like that. It,
Yeah.
it literally goes through every possible aspect of our lives and how it can be entwined and connected with addiction, and how close something like burnout can be, and how it can lead on if you don't really heed the warnings and heed the message.
Yeah. And this helped you recover from the burnout?
This was a fantastic I'm going to say exercise, but all of the books that I've written, I love because I use them.
Yeah.
And like, as you said before, I've written all of my books in a way where you can pick up one chapter, read that chapter, put it down, and never read the book again, and that would be absolutely fine. You
Yeah.
don't have to read it A to Z.
Yeah.
I think today, this age, a lot of people find books too daunting. So, as you said quite rightly, use it as a reference book, use it as something to, if you're a family member, or your friends going through trouble and you want to understand more about it, compassion, understanding, um, you know all of these things are deeply ingrained throughout the book, and it goes through a lot of my experiences from what I personally learned
Yeah.
from my connection to those elements in the book as well.
And there's something I think is really important in what you're saying, which is that even though you're not diagnosed with the same thing, you can learn from people what has worked for them. And there's often those things that are can move across from different spaces, right? That we can learn from. And seeing the positive in somebody else's issues, again, is a really sort of clever approach to life. So and we tend to over compartmentalize, I think, between health and illness in our culture. Whereas actually we can learn from people diagnosed with an illness what has worked for them, and that can be much more have a much broader application into, as you say, well-being. So that's interesting. You mentioned 12 step, which people may not know what that is, but that's peer support groups like historically started by AA, but there are many more of them. Do you go
Yes.
to those types of groups to continue the program, or was it enough for you to learn about it and apply it in yourself?
So I always felt slightly uncomfortable as I was going towards the end of my journey, because as I said, it's a very, very vulnerable space where people talk about, their inner concerns and worries. And I did feel uncomfortable being in some of those meetings, whether it's AA and they're all very, very welcoming, which is
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Um, but I felt, as I said, slightly more uncomfortable
Okay.
to be in a space that I wasn't an addict of.
Good.
However, I found them amazing. I opening, sharing, communication. I continued with therapy for a long time.
Great.
I'm actually still very close to my therapist. We get on very well. But I like the fact that, I've had that experience, and the feedback as well from me, from a therapist, I felt important, because she said to me almost immediately, so you're not an addict. So just forget when you're living with addicts, you kind of you go, well, hold on, am I
Am I,
that, or
yeah,
am
am
I?
I or am I not? I know. Yeah.
So it's nice to get the reinsurance, but I think,
Well,
as I
I had
said,
a friend. It's interesting. I had a friend who went, and I'm sure she won't mind me saying this, but I think it's one of the most instructive stories about positive approaches to life that I've ever heard. Who went to AA because she was uncomfortable with her relationship to alcohol. She did the 12-step program. At the outset, she said to the sponsor, "I don't think I'm an alcoholic, but I want to try find out." And she had an open mind about it. She did that program, at the end of which she said, "Well, I'm not an alcoholic, but I've learned so much from this program they're going to apply to my life." Um, I think that's a super outcome personally.
yeah.
And I think that you are embodying that approach to life. And I think if people can learn from that approach, they're going to be successful. Let me put it in air quotes before I make it too complicated. I know you're going to go, "What does that mean?" It's whatever it needs to mean for you is fine. But you're going to have a good life if you take sort of Oliver's approach, which is that inquisitive learning, seeing the big picture, not seeing problems as obstacles, but as opportunities to learn and grow. Those types of lessons are absolutely crucial, I think. Oliver, it's been lovely to have you back, and I'm sorry I had to cut you off, but there's a time limit. That's the way it goes. And to be honest, mate, if I let you go, you'll never stop.
What do you mean? What do you
Yeah,
mean?
exactly that. That's what I mean. What's on the tin? He will keep going
Yes.
forever. But it's such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for joining me again.
A pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's been a genuine pleasure.
Yeah, you stay there. Folks, I hope you've learned that. Go and check out Oliver. And where can they, is there a central website where people can find you or something, Oliver?
You can literally find me anywhere if you type my name into to Google. But the book's going to be available from Amazon and everywhere you'd expect it to be.
All right,
But my company's Spartan International, and
Spartan.
if you want to get in contact, feel free. I'm always happy
I,
to have a
I
conversation.
would suggest you get in touch with Spartan International. I would. If you're looking to develop a career in finance, it's going to help you out, I'm sure. Anyway, you stay there. Lovely to have you. Thanks for joining us, folks. And I hope you found that as insightful and interesting as I did. And I'll see you at the next episode of the Wellbeing Show. So bye bye for now.